it's that power of the two together. Like I feel like there is this dynamic duo between the two that is, they are better together where, integration makes the business run and facilitation makes it run better.
This is Momentum with Sidekick, where we explore what's changing in business and in leadership, and what that means for our listeners right here and right now.
I'm Nora, and this is Bonny. We're with Sidekick, a realization consultancy that helps leaders, just like you, turn complexity into clarity and ideas into action.
Let's dive in.
It's very clear the world is evolving. It keeps turning, keeps rotating, and it's probably no argument there that the last 5 years has had a lot of change happening. And it gives me some pause to think about as the world evolves, as how we interact as people evolve, how we do business evolves, so should our leadership. And a bit of a perplexity I've been feeling is when it comes to leadership and what makes an amazing leader, I feel like the same kind of tools in your toolkit, while tried and tested and definitely very helpful, things like strategic thinking, decision-making, vision alignment, personal effectiveness, communication, maybe board management, those type of tools in your stakeholder management, those kind of tools in your toolkit, while 100% still valuable, I feel like some are maybe missing as the world evolves. And there's two in particular, spoiler alert, that we've been talking about previous to this around the art of integration and the art of facilitation. And would love to unpack those today and how they can be two new tools that folks could add to their toolkit if they're looking to level up their leadership individually or help develop the people that report into them and the leaders on their team.
Yeah, I think a great topic and lots to unpack there. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the conversation we had in our episode on innovation, how we kind of added to that equation of like innovation is not just the idea. Sure, you need an idea, you need a strategy as a leader. Those are all great kind of skills to have as a leader. But what is truly kind of making the difference is how that is then brought to life. And I feel like that's kind of those two areas of integration and facilitation is tapping into the how a bit more. And they do feel like undervalued, or maybe they didn't serve a purpose yet kind of in the world today, but I do see kind of how they could be at this next frontier in leadership, right? Like with everything happening in the world, it just feels like something needs to shift, and these might be the skills that can help kind of navigate that. It's a little bit of that kind of going from managing to enabling, which then kind of gets me into that space of what we talked about around AI. There's just so much, it's so overwhelming that the skill set of like trying to make sense of it with a group of people instead of kind of trying to have all the answers yourself, right? So going from that know-it-all to learn-it-all or enable or kind of bringing the right people together. So it's a bit of that like part operator still, but also connecting and conducting. It's maybe a word that we can add to that. Conductor.
Yeah, totally agree. I love that. And I think the combination of what's happening in the world and how that's going to kind of influence maybe how leadership changes. Also, folks kind of looking to progress and develop. This might be an episode they want to listen to, but I look forward to a world where leadership is really, pride on that connecting systems, people, with your vision, your strategy, bringing it all together so it's kind of humming along on its own. So I'm optimistic we'll be able to unpack those two things today. Something tells me we're more aligned than in disagreement like we have been in some other conversations, but want to look at it at a few different angles, and hopefully people can take something away from it.
At least when I go back to my experiences, there's often someone or a couple of someones who feel like the glue or the connector in that group. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to look into and what we will unpack today a little bit. So we'll look at what is it, how can you develop it? Because, I do think, but let's explore that. It is a skill set that people can actually practice and develop. So what our listeners can do today to really do that. But let's maybe start first with exploring what are we even talking about when we say integration and facilitation, because that might not be terms that people are familiar with.
Or think of them in different contexts. And again, I do think there are two components in modern leadership that are overlooked. Undervalued, I was going to say, but I take that back. I think overlooked.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Maybe they're seen as more soft skills. We've had conversations about, are people hired to be managers, and leadership is just a plus along the way. And as a manager, are these two skills that you need to manage and get the work done and produce outputs, if you simplify it down? Or do folks think of these two items as kind of back office pieces, So I don't know what it is. And I'm sure I couldn't find anything out there that really could articulate it. But I do think in my experience and working with a bunch of our clients, I've been noticing this trend of these two skill sets. And when they're put together, it's like, wow, it really takes these big ambitions and puts it into action in a pretty cool way and keeps everyone aligned. So maybe I'll start by digging into integration, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on facilitation or facilitative leadership. But for me, integration, quite simplistically, is like connecting the dots, right? It's seeing the patterns, looking for the patterns, being aware that different patterns could exist. If you think of it like a puzzle, you've got all your puzzle pieces around. You start to put your border out first, then you got to look for some similarities in color and look and shape, that could fit together. And it's ultimately, as a leader, I see that as connecting priorities, strategy, people, system structures, bringing all of that together, which some might say is like, wow, that's really complicated, right? Like that feels like a lot and is going to overcomplicate. And here we talk about making complex things clear. Yeah. But I actually think this is a skill that turns complexity into clarity. Right. There's a lot that happens to get an organization going. And when I think of my own experience, when I go to an integrative mindset first, it helps give me a lot of clarity and the clarity people need around me. So I think of it kind of like, you said conductor, like an orchestra.
Yeah.
Right? You've got all your different musicians, all the different instruments, all the different sections. And somehow they all need to come together to make one clear sound and a beautiful piece of music that people want to come back to see, are going to write great reviews about. So think about integration as kind of that orchestra conductor that's bringing all of those pieces and understands the strengths and how they all fit together, but isn't afraid to give feedback at the same time. But
stop the music.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like in a professional setting, project managers, a lot of their role is like innate to integration. Their job is to get from A to B, connect all the dots, and make sure everybody has what they need to keep moving forward and build this beautiful puzzle together. So there's some roles that I think it is very innate and key to what they do, and some that maybe it's less critical or less obvious the need, or that they're even doing it from the get-go.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also something, I think you said, like, you can learn it, or we alluded to that a little bit, but it also just might come more natural to some to see all those connections and kind of like, even without thinking, it might be how your brain works for some people, right? Curious, because the word integration, I think we have been bringing it up in earlier episodes too, in the context of like an integrator as a role. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference for you?
Yeah, I think there are some roles where it's like the name of the role, like an integrator. And some other examples that come to mind of this skill coming to life in some of our work that we've done is with young organizations. So they're growing, they're getting either from that startup to scale up mode and had been building quite organically, very passionate about what they're doing, probably founder led. And kind of putting the pieces together. We need this now. But then it comes to a place that you're large enough that it's oh, how does this all fit together? It's no longer a team of two or a team of one where you only really have to talk to yourself or you can kind of read each other's minds. But how do you get to that stage of 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, 30 people, and your clients are growing that way, and probably your systems are a bit different? How do you connect all of those pieces together? So our work with Park Street is a good example of that, where they were early on. And we're like, what are these building blocks that we need? And how do we put all of these pieces together, merging both the education side as well as the business charity operations side together? And I think some of those connecting the dots, asking yourself, how's the knee bone connected to the hip bone? And again, I do think this comes in neatly to some folks where that's just how their brain works. They want to see the patterns and how the systems are and all the pieces fit together. But I do think a lot of people just asking yourselves those questions. Okay, what else is dependent on this? And if I do X, what's the cause and effect of it? Just starting to think through how things are connected and what those patterns may be.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned kind of, you see this a lot, or we've seen this with clients that are growing and scaling. And there is a bit of this tipping point, right? Where with 3 or 4 people, it might still kind of happen naturally. Yeah. But at 15, you might kind of, the need for someone to take on that role or kind of having more clarity around that role becomes kind of, I think, more important. Yeah. The orchestra, I think, is an interesting one because as you were talking about it, I felt like, but an orchestra, I mean, I've never been a conductor, so I honestly, I don't know how they do it. But I was wondering, would they have a piece of music in mind that they're going to play, and they are going to make sure that this orchestra plays that piece of music, which I'm sure happens. They rehearse and they do that, right? But then I'm always really impressed where, and I think that also exists, right? Where it's an orchestra, and they just kind of jam, if you call it that, in an orchestra. So it is kind of really starting to get in tune and create this harmony, which I think, long story short, that is where it starts entering this territory of facilitation. Totally. Right? So that is about not what you're doing, but how you're doing it. And moving, shifting from more of the command and control, authority-based, control-based, as I said, to more of like collaboration, more of like this organic collective, letting it be with brilliant people. Like every team is a group of brilliant minds in a room, right? And it is how do you tap into everyone's unique value and bring that together for something larger? And that to me is that component of facilitative leadership. So it is, I really see it as a leadership approach that guides teams and organizations to effectively collaborate with one another. It's this approach to create psychological safety where everyone feels comfortable and safe to speak up, to add their piece of the puzzle to the puzzle. Curiosity, inquiry, enablement. I think maybe enablement is versus authority and control. Enablement would be synonymous maybe to facilitation. The other way that I've seen it described is in this HBR article where it is the super facilitator, where I think it already gets into the territory of integration and facilitation merged together. But in that article, this concept of collective intelligence is introduced. And I really love how it's defined there, where it is the group's ability to reason, to innovate, and to solve problems together. So it's truly not reliant on one person in the room knowing the answer and everyone looking at that person, but truly tapping into everyone's expertise, bring diversity of thought, bringing that together. So there is diversity of expertise, lived experiences, creating equitable contributions, and kind of having that come out of the group.
Because I think to your point earlier, like a lot of people would probably reflect on some of their best group experiences, whether work, school, sports, whatever your hobbies may be. And it's usually that is hard to describe, but flow, I think, is a good word for it right now.
Yeah. And you mentioned sports, and that was actually an example that I was thinking of as we were prepping for this episode. I used to play field hockey. And to me, there were, and I know like in basketball, it's probably like you're a point guard or something, but in field hockey, it's the center midfielder. To me, who should be the facilitative leader. But there were always very distinct approaches to it. The center midfielder was either the best player of the field and would kind of go off on their own, score a goal.
Yeah.
Short-term success, if you ask me. I always loved seeing kind of the teams where the center midfielder was the facilitative leader.
Cool.
The person who was kind of strategizing how the game would play out, would be fully kind of aware of where everyone's at, what everyone's skill sets are, what they're good at, how they work together, set someone up who might not be having their best kind of game that day, set them up for an easy goal so that they kind of create confidence again or get confident again.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of that kind of attunement, the emotions, the seeing the things behind what every eye can see, and starting to kind of have that all play out and work together in a way that drives that team success. So that was one that came to my mind, and I think that is again very aligned with how they describe it as a super facilitator in that HBR article. It's around attunement, communication. So as a center midfielder, it's also like coaching the people and where do you need to kind of run next and whatever. And distribution. So distribution of ownership, roles you play, what value you add into the game in this case.
Very cool. What position did you play?
Sometimes I was the center midfield.
Oh, there we go.
I was often kind of on the right side of the field. But I think it was one of my contributions to the team is that systems thinking, seeing kind of where the person would move next and kind of trying to avoid that, what you always see in kids' team sports where it's wherever the ball is, everyone just gravitates there, right?
Yeah.
So trying to kind of coach the team in like what's the strategic play here?
Yeah. And I love the, putting these two together, thinking about it, it's designing collaboration and connection so that as a group, there's like better outcomes moving faster together to get that. And I think we have to acknowledge at least the role that these skills might play in different organizations or cultures. And this is where I think situational leadership comes into play, that there's a time and a place for these. So I just don't want people to be like, I am just going to be the center midfielder all day, every day. Yeah. It's like, there is that reflect, be aware of the situation you're in, the context, the people you're with, and maybe these need to scale up or scale down. I think we've done a great job at expressing our enthusiasm for these two skills, adding them to the toolkit.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know, like, what's the cost when someone doesn't do this?
Yeah, that's a good question. And kind of a time where I've been thinking about that a lot is when I was in a previous job and really kind of started looking into like teal organizations, self-managing teams. And there was a point where I questioned, like, does a team even need a leader? And what is a leader, right? Like what type of leader? So I think through that experience, what I've learned is I was set to kind of build a self-managing team, which is already a bit of a contrast in itself, right? Like how do you design or build a team? But what I've noticed there is that at the start, I kind of played that role of a facilitator and kind of having everyone feel comfortable to add their unique skill set to the point that within that same context, within that system of people, I could have stepped out and they would work kind of in flow together. But as soon as something in the environment would change or one person changed, that system changes too, right?
Yeah.
So my conclusion from that kind of experience was like, ultimately, you do need that integrator for everyone to feel comfortable, to feel that safe space, to sometimes even recognize their added value and become aware of it so that they can really make the most of it and make sure that the team gets to benefit from it the most. So there's something around creating that trust, that safety, a sense of belonging, acknowledgement that without the role being present might not exist. Maybe quickly back to the like, does a team then need a leader? That is another episode maybe. Because I think what I was trying to solve was that inequity or like, and it could be an equal equally valuable role in a team, be the facilitator, right? The other thing that I think is a risk of the facilitative leadership style is, or not having the facilitative leadership style is kind of having decisions just going around in circles, or some people in the room might think a decision was made and then 2 weeks later someone gets back to it and is like,
Right.
I don't recall that being made, because I do see that as a role of the facilitator,
Right.
integrator, to really make it clear what are we solving for here, and to make sure that everyone again is aligned once a decision is being made. I think a risk of the facilitative style is it becoming too much of a democracy potentially, where it's like you obviously want to give everyone a
consensus,
voice, and maybe
creativity.
you start building that consensus. But again, I also that is the role, I think, of the facilitator to sense that and to challenge that and kind of bring that up, and then again have the group solve for that. See that as a bit of a risk, so not kind of the democracy or decision making by consensus or democracy. And again, just not, there's something situational about it, right? Sometimes a crisis situation might ask for a command and control style. So it is, like you said earlier, adding the skill sets to your toolkit, not necessarily throwing everything else out and fully focusing on this.
And I think of some of our clients or folks that we have conversations with, and as a common piece is, we have so many silos. We just operate in silos, but the right hand doesn't speak to the left hand. There's redundancy. Like these two lights, I flip these switches on in my brain, ding, ding. Like those are some of those words that I hear that I'm like, oh, we need to dig into this a little bit more, right? So that's the other side of not having these. Those are some of those effects. And if your organization's designed in silos, it's even more necessary to do that. But that's as you were talking something, I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard that. And that's when those light switches for me.
Yeah. And I think it is the integration piece that would allow you to see it, and the facilitator piece that then kind of makes you do something about it, right? Move through it.
Yeah.
Acknowledge it, call it out. And
totally. And that's where I was started to think about the power of both. Sure, they each have their own merits in isolation. I've definitely used them and pulled on them when needed, but it's that power of the two together. Like I feel like there is this dynamic duo between the two that is, they are better together. Where integration makes the business run, and facilitation makes it run better. Facilitation of the people with the processes and systems makes it run better. And I'm a big fan of change management, and people are probably rolling their eyes because I've said this like 100 times over our 7 episodes or whatever to date. So that's a lot. But, John Cotter, big guy in change management, says there's kind of 3 steps, right? You set a direction, usually your vision strategy, you set and communicate that direction. You align your people and your resources to do it. And then you coach and you manage to effectively execute it. He also says step number 2 is where most organizations fail. They go from set direction to just doing before they truly align.
Yes.
And that is a hard part, right? You can get really excited working on what the future plan looks like, and you just want to start to move into action, and people just want to know, what do I need to do? But that alignment part is really hard. And I think that's where integration and facilitative leadership together. Really, really beautifully. So I would say for folks, no matter in what capacity you are as a leader, you likely are having to lead a group of people through some change of some sort. So think about when you come to that alignment stage, how are you pulling on these two?
Yeah.
And then okay. I was
agree.
like, wow,
Sorry.
Bonnie's speechless.
I agree.
And then, thinking about making this a bit practical, and I'd love to get into kind of skills in a little bit, but to be like, okay, so what does this start to look like in practice? One kind of call out or thing I want to explore is some organizations or some management systems, philosophies, pedagogies are so bought into the need for integration, they create entire roles that are named integrator.
Right.
So an EOS or entrepreneurial operating system, which we've mentioned before that our organization runs on, there is a role in your organization for a person strictly called integrator.
Yeah.
And this is all you do. And sure, they have their kind of philosophy around, you have rocks, you have your IDS, you have your 3-year picture, you have your guarantee, you have all of these things. You have your meeting pulse, that it's the job of this integrator to connect and get all of those things into a flow or humming along. So I think it's really interesting that there's some philosophies out there that are so bought into this, they created an entire role. With that being said, I think, yes, integration is a key part of an integrator's role, but you don't need to be an integrator to integrate.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I don't think they are like solely dependent. You don't have to have one to be the other. So I would encourage anybody in any type of role, like integration can be part of your role and how you do your job effectively.
Yeah. So maybe it is still a role, but not necessarily your job, like the role.
Yeah, and how you do your stuff.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about that for facilitation too. Like there are facilitators, like workshop facilitators, right? Which I think the facilitative leadership skill is definitely a skill that most facilitators, great facilitators have.
Yes.
But that's not to say that if you're not a workshop facilitator, that facilitative leadership is not still a skill that you should practice and can kind of benefit you in your role. So yeah, thanks for setting that up and having me jump on that train for facilitation. But it is around kind of creating this, I don't know, super organism is I think what HBR also refers to it. The 1 + 1 is 3, which we've said before. An interesting insight there, which again, if you equate it to sports, makes a lot of sense too. Like, it's not that when you put all of the most brilliant people together, or the top 10 brilliant in what's most intelligent people together, that you will have a brilliant team.
Yeah.
Like the brilliant teams are the ones that work together in that flow and kind of really work based on that kind of equity, trust, psychological safety piece. And that's also what an MIT study found out across 1,300 teams. The higher collective intelligence groups outperformed regular teams by 44%. And the key drivers were, again, equal voices, psychological safety. Yeah. So I think maybe that's kind of, rounding it up of like, what does a team like look like? It's not just putting brilliant people together. I think it's more so maybe a brilliant integrator facilitator that brings the best out of everyone in that group. Yeah, no, totally agree. And it's funny you say, what's the right term? Like I came across, I subscribed to a ton of newsletters and was sitting in our office last week prepping for this episode and thinking through it. And Juliana, who works on the podcast with us, was sitting beside me. I was like, oh, Juliana, McKinsey also agrees with us. And they came out, their headline was, the best leaders are the ultimate integrators. I was like, oh, yeah. So is there something here? Ultimate integrator, super facilitator. Anyway, I'm not a copywriter, so we'll leave that for folks that know what they're doing there. But I do think there's some pretty cool stuff there that is leading towards this is what sets great leaders apart, right? As we evolve, and there's definitely a time and a place for it, but how can you integrate through a facilitated approach? Yeah. Are there any real world, we've mentioned some of our clients, any real world examples or relevant examples that now looking at the two of these together that you go, oh, maybe this person, that's what they were actually doing and no one ever just called it that? Yeah. And I tend to always go to like the bigger examples, but there are definitely some like closer to home as well, but ones that everyone would be familiar with. And I think it taps into this interesting dynamic of they're often unseen, or they are, at least to date, seem to be the people that are the second in command or like the behind the scenes. But Satya Nadella at Microsoft, I think, is a great example where it was actually the CEO, or like he was the CEO, right? So he was in full spotlight, and what he did was changing the approach from a command and control and what some said was a very toxic work environment to a culture of trust, collaboration, psychological safety, and kind of brilliance coming out of teamwork and collaboration.
Very
so
cool.
I think that's a nice one where I think we're seeing what we will be seeing a lot more, because I think these skill sets will start to be recognized and rewarded and kind of put in the
Totally.
spotlight a lot more in the coming years.
And maybe that sheds light on my first question of, I don't know why these haven't been showcased. And maybe it's always kind of the operator in the background that's doing it. So they don't, they're not in the spotlight as much and maybe don't want to be. I don't know.
There might
right?
be a part of that too.
Yeah.
But I think society just had, I don't know, maybe that comes with generations or like where we are in the world.
Yeah.
We were in need of ideas or new
Yeah.
things or innovation. And now we have a lot of that and we need to actually bring them to life.
Do something with them. Yeah. And it's, as you were describing that, it makes me think of someone that works at one of the sister agencies or organizations to us. And, I don't want folks to leave with the idea of they've probably all been facilitated by a workshop facilitator who has got passion and energy, enthusiasm. And you're like, oh my gosh, how much caffeine did they have today? Right. But there are like silent, quiet ways to do this. And I think sometimes the best integrators and facilitators are the quiet ones in the room. They should be the ones listening all the time and guiding, right? So I don't also want people to go like, I'm a bit more introverted, I don't speak up as much, or I don't like being the center of attention. There are ways to integrate and exercise facilitative leadership in your own way through more smaller, quieter moments. And I think of the woman that we work with, and she's brilliant at it, right? Like, and I think people, it's kind of like they don't know it's happening to them, and then they leave a room being like, whoa, we just answered so many things, and like I felt heard, and I'm bought in on what's going on, and I understand what everybody's doing. Like, it's pretty fascinating to see it come to light in different ways that isn't being in the limelight or the one that likes to speak up or be a loud voice in the room.
And to your earlier point, in talking to her, she's also not looking for that recognition or the tap on the shoulder of like, oh, you did a great job. It's truly what she enjoys doing and where she gets kind of her.
And I relate
own
to that.
energy
I'm
from.
like, I probably err on the side of over integrating and over indexing on facilitated leadership because I just love it so much, right? Like I just love doing it, and it's a big motivation for me. I like the outcomes of it and the benefits of it. And I am the one that's always thinking about what are the patterns and connections, and have to be careful not to over pattern things either, right?
Make it too complex.
Yeah. But I'd love to go to the question as we're kind of bouncing around here a little bit of like, and you touched on a smidge earlier of like, so can anyone actually do this, right? Everybody has their strengths. We've talked about some of this will come innately to others. Can everybody actually do this? Is everyone capable of it?
Yeah. I mean, I equate it to running a marathon. Like, I think in theory, everyone's capable of running a marathon as long as you really want it, you train for it, you put your mind to it, you shift other things. I think you can do it. Situations, circumstances might have to be matching kind of where you are at with it. So yes, I do think it is a skill set that can be learned, but with anything, you do really need to want it, see the value of it. So maybe you need to experience it. And when I look at myself, I think I've seen myself in roles where I think people saw me as this integrator, facilitator, and it was totally kind of that creating flow was what I lived for and what was truly my kind of driving my satisfaction in my role. And I've been in other places where that part of me did not necessarily come out that naturally. So I think there's also something around every group of people, every organization is a system in and itself.
Yeah.
And it depends a little bit on the other players who takes on this role.
Yeah.
So there might not always be the right place and time and circumstances for it. But yes, I do think everyone can learn.
Yeah.
And like with running a marathon, it is, I think, also the art of starting small. A technique that I recently learned about, so I'm committed to kind of practicing that, is one that comes from the art world, but IDEO, design thinking, kind of has fully embraced it for the more business context of it, is something called visual thinking strategies. And counter to what the name might imply, it's not about like drawings or putting things up on a wall. It's truly a discussion technique where just kind of practicing 3 questions. You all take the art example, you take a painting, and the facilitator guides you through a discussion asking 3 simple questions. What are we seeing? Mm-hmm. What makes you say that you see that? What makes you see that in this? What more can we find? And it's all kind of techniques around the collective intelligence, creating a safe space. It's the same question for everyone. There's a lot of silence, quietness in the room, a lot of thinking process. Anyway, we can dive into that deeper another time, but visual thinking strategies for people who want to explore it a bit more. An example of where you can start small, just take this example or take this kind of technique and guide a group through it.
Cool. Well, and I think your point on small steps is important. And I do agree with you that if you are in a leadership position, where you pull up these 2 skills is definitely based off of the people, the context, the system. But I do think like I would encourage, even if you're an individual contributor listening to this, like how is integration going to play a role, right? How is facilitative leadership? Doesn't mean you have to be responsible for 10 people, right?
Yep.
In my relationships, how I work with others, how can you practice it to just shift your mindset and how you add value every single day, which is cool. But I'd love to maybe start to narrow us in a little bit of what are some of these small steps, right? Like, I do think they are skill sets. I do think they can be learned if you actually want to commit to them. They, yes, personality traits and maybe your passions and preferences play a role in what you'll gravitate to next. But I think they're muscles you can build. What, in your experience in doing these 2 things, are some of those tried and tested pieces that you would recommend others do if they want to start practicing in these areas?
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because some come really natural to me. So then it's hard to codify kind of what is it that I do there. And others, not so much. And I have like tools that help me do it. First one that comes to mind is that system thinking, that kind of connecting the dots. And that happens to be like how I'm wired. But it is kind of connecting people, processes, priorities. And kind of all moving towards one destination or one goal. If it does not necessarily come naturally to you, it is a question that you can ask yourself every time, right? Like, how is this connected to other things? What other processes or other people are dependent on this thing?
Yeah.
Mind mapping could be a really great exercise to do there. Start with your thing and just start kind of creating those connections. It's how the human brain works. It's just visualizing that. And another tool that comes to mind is the Cohesion X matrix from Lean, where it is connecting long-term vision with shorter-term goals, with the people working on it, with the measurements of how you kind of define success. So that's another great tool that came to mind, where it is literally built to make connections and that systems thinking. We talked a lot about facilitation, obviously. So that's another, I think, skill set or smaller thing that you can start with. Most immediate, I think, is meetings, where you can look at what role do I take in this meeting? Can you take yourself out of the participant or kind of the educator or the leader role and put yourself in a facilitator role? And as you prepare for the meeting, think about what are things that I can do to increase participation in the group? Who are the people that I have in this team? And there are a lot of like facilitation techniques that you can find online. Liberating Structures, I think, is a great resource for that. Things like, I don't know, people that are a bit familiar with it, like the 1, 2, 4, all, or the what, so what, now what types of questions. So, I mean, go online and look for facilitation techniques and start trying that in meetings and see how that changes energy and participation.
Yes, I do think there are moments where that more structured facilitation, or what people think of when they hear facilitator or facilitation, does come in. But I think, to make it, yes, the moment of facilitating a meeting, but also take it back to facilitative leadership. A key thing that comes to mind for me is attunement, which to me is like, I hate the saying read the room, but maybe that will relate to people, but it's being observant. It's being very observant of what is going on, what is being said and what is not being said. Body language, it's where your own self-awareness and emotional intelligence and being able to understand where people are at, those come together. And like you said, embrace the silence. Like some of the best folks that I've seen be facilitative leaders are often more quiet than not.
Yeah.
And an acronym that a woman had told me once, and now I had a friend staying at my house. My office is in my guest room, and she's like, "What is this posted on your wall that says wait?" And I was like, "It means why am I talking?" Then I have to remind myself all the time. So I think a key piece is if you're trying to practice and flex this muscle, you're going to have to hold back sometimes if you're someone that likes to be vocal and very participatory, like you said, and take back and listen is a big one. But then that last piece around empowerment and building ownership. So you also cannot be the center of the show. If you're embracing integration and facilitated leadership, you cannot be the center of the show. It is not about you. It is not about your ideas, right? It is about how can the group or the people co-author and create this ownership of the outcome together and move together through this. Because like that HBR article said, it was like the groups that could self-organize and self-commit and work together, they were the most successful ones. So yes, it's helpful to have sometimes a person kind of guiding it, but it can't be all about you.
No, that's fair. There's also this component of like holding judgment. And I think that's a small thing that people can do too. It is a mindset shift of like, instead of giving your opinion, can you ask a question and be truly inquisitive, right? So that's, I think, another small thing. So tools that we've referenced, I think entrepreneurial operating system is one kind of where the integrator and the skill of integration, I think, is nicely described and kind of offers you that cadence, structure, tools to work within. Liberating structures for like micro tools, facilitative techniques, visual thinking strategies. One that I would love to explore more myself, but we'll share the link in our show notes. Design thinking, IDEO, I think does a lot of integration, facilitative leadership, has a lot of resources there too. And as Sidekick, I think this is what we live and breathe every day. So also on our own channels, we often share insights, tools, frameworks, learnings that might be interesting for folks.
Cool. Love it. Yeah, those are some great tools. And maybe when we publish the episode, we can put some links in with some of that stuff, both on our own channels and some places where we commonly go to learn and strengthen these for ourselves. Yeah. So I feel like we're coming to a natural close here, and hope that folks understand a little bit more about what integration means, what facilitative leadership means, how that could help them as a leader or just doing their job, or moving through life. But I would say there's kind of three takeaways for me that come from this is integration isn't about control. It's about connection and cohesion. And facilitation isn't just about running meetings. That's a part of it, but it's just not it. But it's about this communication and creating that like collective intelligence as the super organism and bringing those two pieces together. And anyone can do it. It's just small, simple steps to get started. Practice, ask for feedback. But I think when you bring those two things together, it's really going to make things flow or get momentum, if you will.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice. And to kind of to add that visual to it, I think we referenced the orchestra conductor, bringing all the parts together to create harmony.
Yeah.
the other one is the center midfielder or the point guard in sports. It is kind of truly the art of integration and facilitation combined, less pulling and pushing, more enabling.
Yep. So I feel like it's time for our challenge, our listener challenge. Not an episode goes by without a challenge. So while I did just say facilitation wasn't just about facilitating meetings, I do think, to your point earlier, it is when a group of people are together, whatever the context may be, and have to work through something, it is a good point to exercise this integration and facilitation. So I encourage you in an upcoming group setting, meeting, whatever that may be, reflect upon some of these new integration and facilitative leadership skills and techniques and tools. And how are you going to participate or redesign or guide the group through to achieve better outcomes faster and together? And remember, guide and listen first and talk second.
The power of silence.
Yes.
That being one of the tools. But as we said before, we'll share some links to either our own resources and liberating structures to kind of inspire some of those facilitation techniques, and then notice what happens in the room.
Totally. Connect those dots. Ensure people feel seen, know their strengths. They feel like they can participate. And when you pull all of that together, systems will run smoother. People will be happier. Progress will really stick. So think about that. How are you going to do that?
Thank you for listening to Momentum with Sidekick. If you liked today's conversation, don't hesitate to follow us, subscribe to our channels, reach out to us with your thoughts, share with us how you are creating momentum in the world. See you next time.